In less than 24 hours, we are finally getting seamless gutters installed on the house. We were waiting until all the stone veneer was done and the ledge was on so that we could position the downspouts appropriately, and now that time has finally come. If you want a seamless gutter, which truly means it's one piece from beginning to end, in the case of the front of this house, it's 43 feet long, you really have no choice but to hire it out. It's a specialty machine and it is simply not worth trying to rent or buy or figure out how to use one of these for a one-off job. I could have tried to DIY this by buying a bunch of gutter sections, either out of vinyl or aluminum, and trying to piece them together. But the bottom line is gutters leak at the seams and the end caps, and seamless gutters gets rid of the seams. I also think they just look a lot better because they don't have visible seams. So this was a pretty no-brainer decision to hire this one out. On the front, we'll just be doing the one gutter at the bottom of the roof. I decided not to put it on the dormers for now. I think we'll be okay without it. And there will be a downspout at each end. This is a 40-foot long house with about 1.5 foot overhang on each side. So around a 43-foot long gutter. With the downspout at either side, we'll have the high point in the middle and just do a very gradual slope on either end. That way it's nice and symmetrical. The main reason I wanted the two downspouts was to keep it pretty symmetrical looking. On the back, we also just have one long, simple section of gutter and the downspout down this side here. We do just have one downspout on here, and this roof size and roof length is really about the maximum that one downspout can handle. We're getting 6-inch gutters all the way around, which will handle a little bit better flow, but I didn't want to put a downspout on that side because we just have a lot of stuff going on under here with deck footings that I have to make sure I avoid, the gas line, the septic pipe, and the well water line are coming out there, and we'll have the future addition over there eventually. So I really didn't want to interfere with any more of that side than I had to, so I figured I'd just run the downspout over to this side. When I did these underground gutter drains, I also did a 45 off of this corner right here and went just under those pile of rocks with it. That is where another downspout will be to catch the water coming off our deck. I want to do a waterproof bladder under the deck to keep a nice dry space underneath the deck so we can have stuff stored down there. We don't need to worry about it getting wet when it rains. But for today, we have a little bit of a project on our hands before these gutters and downspouts can get installed. Way back before we backfilled the foundation and I wanted to put these gutter drains in, I tried to think really hard about where these downspouts could pop up to be right underneath this quarter board. And surprise, I got all three of them wrong. So I need to partially dig up the ends of all three of our downspout drains and relocate them with some fittings to make them right. The downspout's gonna be coming straight down the center of this corner board, and it's gonna need to go right into our drain. This one is about 2 inches off of the center of the corner board, which is actually the closest one that I got. The other one is like 4 inches and the other one's like 3 inches. But ironically, the ones that are closest to where they should be are the hardest ones to fix because of the elbows. They have a minimum range of offset. So a 22.5 degree elbow on a 4-inch pipe is gonna give me a 2-inch offset. So luckily I am at the very minimum that it could be. I'm gonna have 2 elbows down in the ground glued right next to each other to get this thing to shift one way. The other ones have a couple challenges of their own. This one is way off the corner. I'm really not sure what I was going for there. That's actually probably more like 6 inches, not 4. And it also would have blocked the outlet that I put in if this were in the right location. So luckily it's got to move over and it should be good. But here's my problem with this one. I didn't leave myself very much flange at all. There's like a 1/2 inch of exposed pipe. And so if I'm gonna have to cut this guy off, I really am not gonna be able to glue anything back onto it. It's way too small. These things need like 2 inches of pipe engagement. So I'm gonna have to come up with a creative solution to extend this guy a little bit further. All I need to do is get this 45 elbow to extend out further. So I need more pipe length in here. I just got to figure out the best way to do it. And this is the last one. This one is about 4 inches off. It needs to move to the right here. And this is actually going to be the easiest one. It's the most shallow because it's the highest drain in the whole system. Obviously, I've already started to dig it up a little bit to assess the situation. And I'm basically going to cut this right here and just redo the whole pipe. I figured that would be the easiest course of action. It'll just cost me $145, $190. Before I get started on the relocation projects here, I just want to reiterate the lesson learned. Do not put your gutter drains in until you absolutely know where they need to be. I should have either stubbed out a pipe with absolutely no fittings on it and buried it and then done all the fittings at this point, or cut the pipe to length and mock the fittings up, but do not glue anything until I'm actually ready to install a downspout. So that is going to be a lesson learned for the future build. another life lesson learned the hard way. The reason I need to redo this section completely and not just shorten this length of pipe here to bring the 45 back towards the corner is because I also screwed up the distance between the foundation. You can see how close this thing is to the stone veneer. It basically interferes when you put the pipe there. So this has got to get spaced out from the wall further as well, especially because the downspout needs to clear that ledge up there that's going to have a small jog in it and then come straight down into the drains. Hole number 1 is a go. Before I do something stupid and cut this too short or something like that, I'm mocking this up with where I want it. So what I'm envisioning is putting the edge of this pipe basically at the same vertical plane of my ledge. That way, when I put the gutter adapter on, it gives another half or so inch of offset, and my downspout can come straight down this corner board, make a slight jog, and then come straight down without touching the ledge or interfering, and it's not too far off the wall. And then of course I'll shorten this little piece to move this 45 so that it comes straight centered on the corner board. These multi-tools really do make life so much easier. Here's the dry mock-up before we put the last 45 fitting on. The edge of this pipe is now right in line with the edge of this stone ledge. And like I said, my offset gives me another half inch or so of clearance. So the gutter should just have one small jog in it, come off the ledge about a half inch, and then be able to come straight down into the adapter perfectly plumb. As I'm mocking this 45 up to get this little pipe length here, this is a quick tip I wanted to share that I just learned on Instagram. By putting your level flat on the top of the pipe, you can see both vials at the same time and get the pipe perfectly plumb without repositioning the level. And as a bonus, I can use the one straight edge of this level and put it right in the center of my pipe and line it up with the line that I've just marked on the wall for where my center line needs to be. So with just my little Harbor Freight level, I can get this pipe in the right spot and then take a measurement of this gap here to figure out my total pipe length I need for just this little section right here. And there's the dry mock-up. I've checked it and double checked it, and I've put marks on the fittings so that I get the rotation right when I glue them up. This should work. It looks a little bit off. For some reason, the stone veneer kind of messes with your eye. When I put my 6-foot level between the center of that corner board and the center of this, it's dead on. Now I just need to glue this joint and these two joints, and I'm gonna leave this unglued so that we can always pull this clean out if we need to. If there's a little bit of leakage in this pipe, it really doesn't matter because it will just go into this rock, and that's what it's been doing with no gutters for the past year. The first one is fixed. Hopefully the other two go as smoothly. Let's go to that back corner and see what we have to do. After a quick evaluation of this one, it looks like it is 2¼ inches that it needs to come over this way. That's what I had estimated earlier. And then in this distance from the wall, this is actually a really thick stone. So the edge of that ledge is only 5/8 of an inch from the edge of that stone. So I'm gonna try to bring it in a little bit this way too. And this is how I'm planning on doing that. Just a couple 22½ inch elbows. When you get them lined up exactly opposite one another, it makes an offset to just shift this pipe over. These 22.5 elbows make an offset half the diameter of the pipe. So this is a 4-inch pipe. This makes a 2-inch offset. A 45 elbow makes a full 4-inch offset. To make sure the fittings are exactly opposite one another, I use the parting lines from the molding process, these two little skinny lines right here. If those are lined up when the fitting is glued up, the two fittings are exactly opposite one another. There's the basic idea on this one. Obviously I got to trim that pipe lower in the ground and put the jog down below grade level, but that seems to line up pretty well, and I can twist the double elbow there a little bit so that it goes towards the wall to get it in the right spot in that dimension as well. That's 2 done. Looks very similar to where I started, and that's a good thing. On to the last one. I mentioned this last one was going to be a little bit tricky because there's not enough pipe sticking out of this Y that's on its back in the ground to make a glue joint, but I was doing some measuring and thinking about how I'm going to make this connection, and it turns out that one of these PVC storm and drain hub fittings, the outside diameter of it is just about 4.5 inches. What else is about 4.5 inches is the outside of a Schedule 40 PVC pipe. So I'm able to use this 4-inch Fernco coupler meant for a Schedule 40 4-inch PVC pipe, and I'm gonna put this on the outside of that Y that's in the ground, on the outside of that hub coupling, and then I'll just cinch the top down over just a normal piece of storm and drain. It's not the most ideal solution, but I think it's gonna work, and it's gonna allow me to put an extension on this and then another 45 like right here to come straight up the corner of the wall. Well, that was the easiest one of all 3 of them. The Fernco worked great. I did put a straight coupling down here to sort of reinforce that end and build it out to the right diameter. And there's enough flex in that Fernco to get me the right distance off the wall too. I had to come outwards about an inch or so by the time I got to the end of this 11-inch long arm. I'm actually surprised at how firmly that Fernco holds it in. It's not much less flexible than if that were an actual glue joint and this were just a pipe off there. I'm pretty impressed with that. I don't think it's going to be an issue at all long term. That's 3 out of 3 done. Glad to have that task behind me, and we are ready for the real show tomorrow. Today is finally the day for gutters. The guys just rolled in. I'm contracting with a local company out of Maryland, and I'm hoping they're gonna do a pretty good job. I gave them the rundown on the downspout locations and made sure they are not gonna scratch the siding. Here's our downspout. Looks like it comes in about 10-foot sections. This is aluminum, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what gauge it is?
027.
Gotcha. The guys wrap the ends of their ladders in carpet, which does a nice job at protecting the siding. On vinyl, this doesn't matter as much, but on our pre-finished James Hardy, I really did not want these ladders to scratch or scuff the factory paint, and I also did not want any sharp edges that could dent the PVC board and batten. Here's the moneymaker, seamless gutter rolling machine. That is a big roll of trim coil right there.
It's wider than the regular trim coil.
Gotcha. Somewhere around like 14-inch width or something like that?
That's over, I think it's over 15.
Okay. Gotcha. 027 gauge, same as the downspouts?
I don't know if that's 027 or 032, I don't know. Spouts used to be 19.
generator power to run the machine. Wow. Wow, that's a long piece of aluminum. Holy smokes. 43 foot. Loading up the trough with hangers and clips. Good idea, so they're there where you need them. So fast. One man, 140-foot length of gutter. It's amazing that that aluminum stays so rigid.
How do you guys make sure this
You're able to sight it in basically by eye, yeah.
Well, I use my finger.
By finger.
Yeah.
Measures his finger. You can tell up by the gap off the fascia bottom. It's very subtle, yeah, that's what you want.
Well, you don't need a whole lot.
Just enough to drain water. Here's some perspective for how long this thing is. I mean, it's just huge.
Big houses, we do like 2-3 big houses a day.
2 or 3 a day, even with lots of jogs and corners and stuff?
Yeah, it depends on how big, but depending on how much it's cut up, and the straight runs are easier than the corners.
Right, I figured this would be a pretty simple job for you.
Yeah, it kind of depends.
So how many of like our house could you do a day?
You said 5 or 6.
Yeah, 5 or 6.
I mean, by the end of the,
just those 2 pieces, they don't take long.
right.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
easy.
You're gonna be done here in like less than 2 hours, I would say.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's quick work.
Yeah,
Wow.
I bet you spend more time driving some days.
I bet.
We had to drive up this morning.
Right.
It was an hour drive, and it only took us probably an hour and a half to do the job. But the
Wow.
guy paid us for travel, so.
And like an hour and a half later, the guys are already packing up, ready to roll. That was quick. They're rolling out. What do you think? Did the inspector take a look at it?
Georgie,
Inspector?
what do you think?
What are you
Okay
thinking?
with it? He just wants to go
Oh
in the
my
car.
gosh. Well, that was quick, and that was a really good example of a task that it's much better to hire out than try to DIY. I don't even really know how I would have tried to do that by myself or just with me and Elena. It just wouldn't have turned out well at all and definitely would not have looked very good. Now we just gotta wait till the next rain, which is gonna be in a couple days, to see how it all works. Well, my mind's in gutter mode. I went back over here and dug this pipe stub that I left out here that's gonna connect to our deck waterproofing drain. I neglected to mark this well when I originally buried it, so I thought I should dig it up, and I'm just gonna use that piece of scrap pipe to stick down in there and make sure I know where it's at when I need to go connect to it when we build the deck in the spring. This pipe runs at an angle basically right over to the corner of the foundation where it Y's in with this guy right here. And that pipe comes along the foundation until you hit the electric meter, then it comes out at a 45. Those two pipes come together. You come down the hill and that is where it daylights. I put together a little rock garden of sorts down here to help sort of diffuse the heavy flow. With all that roof area combined into one pipe, that's gonna be a pretty good flow of water during a pouring rain. So I think the big rocks will sort of help break that up and let the water diffuse into the ground. In our area, new construction projects are usually required to run their roof runoff into a gigantic gravel-filled pit, either called a dry well or a seepage pit. And we were under that requirement too. It was in the initial plan, but I reached out to the local zoning office and said, listen, we are in the middle of the woods here. There's no nearby neighboring houses. Is it possible for me to not put this really expensive, huge gravel pit in the ground and they basically sent me just a list of short criteria. I think it was 75 foot to the nearest property line and less than a 5% grade where the daylight pipe occurs, and I don't have to put a seepage pit in. So just that one little phone call saved me a ton of money on dealing with the stormwater. If you have a project and you have to put one of these stormwater pits in, definitely make that phone call just to see if you can potentially get out of it as well. I'm definitely happy we went with the 6-inch rather than the 5-inch. The 6-inch not only will flow a lot more water and be less prone to leaf clogging from our wooded lot, but it also takes up a lot more space on that 2x8 fascia. I think the 5-inch would have looked awkwardly small on that large fascia board. If we ever do decide to put gutters on those dormers, I definitely want to use 5-inch up there. 6-inch would have been too large for up there where we only have a 2x6 fascia board rather than the 2x8. The only minor hiccup of the day was, of course, with my downspout placement. I was a little bit too precise in trying to keep this thing snugged up to the wall where that ledge was. And I had this thought about their offsets when I was doing this, but I was like, yeah, it'll probably be fine. These stock offsets struggle to make a really small jog. It needs to come out at least a couple inches. So you can see I planned for about a 1/2-inch gap here, and they needed at least, that looks like almost 1.25 inches, something like that. So if I took a level to this, it definitely wouldn't be perfectly plumb down the wall, but it's pretty darn close. It is what it is. Not really too worried about it. On this other side, it was the same sort of issue. They were able to get a little bit tighter, but honestly, I will probably never notice this again. Yesterday and last night, we got our first really substantial rain since we put the gutters in. It pretty much rained all day and all night, nonstop and really heavy. And I came out here last night to look at the pipe, and there was a good flow out of that. When I first came out, there was a whole pile of leaves right at the edge here. It was probably this deep into the pipe that came out. There was water flowing around it, but I pulled those out and it cleaned everything out. This is like a good small river coming out of this, and my rock structure basically worked exactly as planned, just kind of diffused throughout here. There wasn't any, one big stream running downhill or anything. It just sort of seeped into the ground. I made another observation on the back of the house, and that is there was still a decent amount of water coming between the gutter and the fascia, and it's kind of dripping down the fascia like it used to with no gutters. I think the main reason for this is because when the roofers were here, I didn't specify an overhang length for the metal, and they used their default of about 1 inch. At the time, I didn't know any better, but in hindsight, I think that should have been more like 2 or 2.5 inches instead. I'll definitely remember this for the future addition or any other metal roofs I deal with. So I think I may need to add another piece of flashing, basically another longer drip edge that comes from underneath the roof and then goes down and over top the edge of the gutter. I also noticed when the guys were putting it up that the back side there has a little bit of wave to it. There's no hem on the back side of the gutter to keep that perfectly straight. It's just a flat piece of metal, so it sort of ripples as it needs to. I think water is getting in between those waves as well. So the easiest thing that I can think of is to just basically add another larger drip edge up underneath the roof. We might have to loosen the last screws at the bottom of the roof, or maybe we can get lucky and just be able to kind of wedge it in there and have the lip of that apron come down further than the existing one and go right over top the gutter now that it's all installed. I'm not gonna bother with this until next year. It's really not that crazy of amount of water that's dripping. I would say it captures at least 90% of what's coming down the roof, but we will have a deck here eventually, so I'd like to address it so that we're not getting rained on when we're walking out the door to the deck. Being that we are on a wooded lot, a lot of folks have asked us if we're getting gutter guards, and it's not something that I really thought about when we installed the gutters. The gutter guy didn't even mention it, to be honest, but I think in the future it might not be a bad idea. I've heard mixed opinions on gutter guards. Sometimes it seems like they get clogged just as easily as the normal gutters. Sometimes it seems like they're a miracle. It just depends on who you ask. We did get the 6-inch gutters with the 4x3-inch downspouts, so larger downspouts than typical. And it goes to show with the flow last night that I observed, there's a lot of clean out action that happens just from the water. Like the leaves do make it all the way down the downspout and all the way out to the end of that tube pretty easily. It's all smooth piping underground. So I think I'm gonna try it for a couple years to see what it's like with no gutter guards, to see if it really is that much of a nuisance. And if the gutters truly do get clogged and I have to clean them out like frequently. I'm just gonna play that one by ear, and in the future, we can look into getting gutter guards if we think it will help. That is a wrap on gutters. We really like how they turned out. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.